Welcome to the Pint Glass Football Podcast.
What's up, PGF Nation? We are back. The Chiefs are on life support. Well, so are the Cowboys for that matter. Packers with the huge win over the rival Bears. College football playoff bracket is set. We have a lot to say about it and where they got it wrong this year, plus more to get to. But I'm your host, Brad Fowler. Joining me as always, my co-host, Alex Higdon. Alex, what is going on?
Yeah, Brad, this is the time to get into everything that's going on NFL-wise. You have the teams dwindling down to who's going to be in control, who's not going to be in control. So this is the time to kind of pick your teams and see who's in control.
Yeah, the playoff picture is starting to really take shape in the NFL. And then, of course, the college football playoff picture is set. Got a lot to get to, Alex, but I want to jump back really quick because normally we don't spend a lot of time back on the Thursday night game by the time we get to this episode. But I think it's worth mentioning here because we had a Lions-Cowboys game that was a big matchup. It was a big game for both teams because the Cowboys had won 2 straight coming into this game. They were trying to make a late season push to possibly sneak into the playoffs after a really rough start to their season. But Detroit pulls away in this game. Look, Detroit's now won 15 consecutive games following a loss. And to me, that just shows the sign of a well-coached team.
When you look at this game actually was close in the fourth quarter, but then the fourth quarter, they put together 2 touchdowns that put them ahead and kind of knocked the Cowboys out.
Yeah, and as far as the Lions, because, look, I think this might have been it for the Cowboys. It's going to be really tough for them to get into the playoffs. They really needed to kind of run the table and rattle off some wins here. It looked like they maybe that, and they still, I think they're still not mathematically eliminated, but it kind of looks like at this point, they're going to have some things kind of go their way. So not likely that they get in. But the Lions, obviously, they still look like a playoff team. For me, though, and we've talked about this recently with the Lions, the defense is still a major issue, especially the secondary. They have tried to fix that. They've tried to address it with draft picks. They've tried to address it with some free agency moves, and it just isn't working. Offensively, this team can run the ball. We know that. David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs combined for 4 rushing touchdowns. They beat up Dallas up front. Like you said, Dallas was able to get within 3 points in the fourth quarter, made this game interesting, but then Detroit, of course, pulls away. Dallas defense is better since they've made some of these moves, don't get me wrong, but it's still not very good. You know, they've still got a long ways to go. They were only able to sack Jared Goff once in this game. They never really got consistent pressure on him, and when you give Jared Goff time to throw and get comfortable, this Lions offense is tough to stop. On the other side, the Lions sacked Dak 5 times and had over 20 pressures on Dak Prescott. So, you know, in the words of Dennis Green, they are who we thought they were. I mean, I don't trust Detroit in the playoffs. And as far as Dallas, it just doesn't look like they're going to be making the playoffs. Monday Night Football game last night. Normally we record this before the Monday Night Football game. Had some things come up. So apologies, guys. This episode's coming out a little later than expected. But this was a pretty good game, pretty entertaining game, defensive battle. Eagles, Chargers. Look, the Eagles just dropped their 3rd straight game. And the sky is officially falling in Philly, Alex. I'm hearing it from Eagles fans. The Eagles radio, Eagles media is going crazy right now. Look, before we kind of get to that, I want to point out that I think this was just a gritty, tough win for the Chargers. I have no idea how this team keeps finding ways to win behind that offensive line. That Eagles front 7 was dominant in this game. They got a ton of pressure on Herbert. It seems like they were in the backfield every play. That defense played good. They gave them a chance to win this game. This game just turned into a fist fight. Both defenses making all kinds of big plays. And look, it's easy to point the finger at Jalen Hurts today. After a game with 5 turnovers, he was not very good. But here's my question, Alex. Is he the problem in Philly? Because right now, you know, you've got all these Philly fans that are pointing the finger at the offense coordinator. They're pointing the finger at Nick Sirianni. They're pointing the finger at the offensive line and this and that. It seems like the blame is going around just about everywhere. But I want to know from you, is Jalen Hurts the real problem?
Well, yeah, because he's the guy on the field. He's going to be the real problem. I mean, 21 to 40, 240 yards, no touchdowns. However, 4 interceptions. That's on Jalen Hurts. There's not too much blame. You can look around and say, no, here, maybe this would happen. No, this is on Jalen Hurts here. He has to take the whole cradle and hold that because he's the one throwing those interceptions. I mean, now, this might have been a game that was out of sorts simply because he threw 4. He may only throw 1 a game. He usually doesn't throw 4 in the game, but this 4 in the game was atrocious. They sacked Justin Herbert 7 times for 33 yards. However, but Justin Herbert also led them 10 carries for 66 yards. So the game itself, before you see the score, looks like the Eagles should have won. However, those interceptions were the reason that they lost.
Yeah, no, they were. It was killer. And you're right. He's typically not a guy that turns the ball over a lot. But I also think it's fair to say that this offense has been sputtering. And I think a lot of it has to do with the lack of a consistent pass game. Look, Saquon hasn't been able to run the ball. They haven't been able to get that going like they did last year. I know that's part of it. I'm not pointing the finger completely at Jalen Hurts, but I think it's time to realize that this guy, and I've been saying this for a while now, and I think you agree with me, Alex, he's a limited quarterback. He just is. And when you don't have everything around you going well, like last season when he had arguably the best offensive line in football, the best running game in football, a top-notch defense, these great wide receivers on the outside, look, everything looks great when it's perfect around him. This year, the team has kind of taken a step back, and it's caused him to take a step back, and I think it's really affecting him. My other question is, this is 3 straight. This team is starting to play some pretty poor football at the worst time down the stretch here. Now, there's still time to turn it around here, but is it time to hit the panic button in Philadelphia?
Yeah, as far as I'm concerned. And again, even though Dallas lost that game against the Lions, they're right there because they would have been 7-5. This would have put the Eagles at 8-5. But right now, the Eagles are in trouble.
Yeah, and I don't think it's likely that Dallas catches them. But then again, I wouldn't have thought it was likely that they drop 3 straight either and leave the door open for Dallas, because it's certainly not over now. But I think there's a lot of concerns around this team right now, and I think rightfully so, especially after the performance we saw on Monday Night Football. Let's jump back to some Sunday games. We had a big one. I mentioned it in the intro. I think the Chiefs are officially on life support. This was a gut punch for the Kansas City Chiefs. And look, they're on the ropes. It's not over for them, but it's not looking good right now because after losing to Houston, they only have about a 15% chance to make the playoffs, just 52% chance if they win their final 4 games. So even if they run the table, it's going to be a coin toss, Alex. And I think the reality is that the defense has been carrying this team for the last 2 years now. And it's why they're in so many close games. Last year, they were able to win every single one of those close games. I knew that wasn't going to keep happening this year. They've been on the opposite side of these close games this year. They just haven't been able to make the plays down the stretch, whether it's Mahomes with some uncharacteristic turnovers late in games or guys dropping big passes. It just hasn't clicked for this team. And I'm not hitting the panic button for them. Even if they miss the playoffs, I still believe in Mahomes. I still believe in Reed long term. I think this team will be fine. I do think it's going to be an important offseason for them. I think it's going to be an important draft class for them. They're going to have to hit on some players and kind of replenish this roster in some key spots that's been hurting them. But the Mahomes and the offense just haven't been good enough late in these games to win most of these tight games this year. And quite frankly, it's been kind of shocking.
Yeah, this game looks similar to the game with the Eagles and Chargers, because if you look at it, you see that he got sacked a few times. 26 carries, 68 yards. There wasn't a lot going on, but then you go and you look at the statistics of the Chiefs where Patrick Mahomes threw 3 interceptions. And that was the problem. He threw 3 interceptions. He also led the team in rushing, 7 carries for 59 yards. This was again their problem. And I think Josh Simmons being out, they're missing a running game. I mean, Kareem Hunt had 12 carries for 30 yards. Isaiah Pacheco had 9 carries for 30 yards. They're missing a running game. They need to have some type of running game that they can get behind, that can open up the passing, because what's happening is the defense is saying, you know what? We don't have to keep an extra man up. We can leave. Matter of fact, we could take a guy out of our front and put him in the back to protect the pass, because Kareem Hunt and Isaiah Pacheco are not big-time running backs that are going to get 100, 150 yards rushing, because they're not that type of running back. So they can now put more people in the backfield to protect against the pass than they have against the run. So running back is going to be key when it's their time to pick whether they make the playoffs or don't make the playoffs. I still have to wait and see until they're out. But let's just say they don't make the playoffs, and they can go and get whichever one, our running back out of Notre Dame or the running back out of Missouri. They can get either one of those running backs that can come in here and do some damage. But until they do that, this is going to be the team that you continuously see every week.
Yeah, I still think they need to address O-line. I think they need to address the running back position. You're right. I think there's a few spots on this roster they need to address. Like I said, I think it is going to be an important offseason, and it's going to be an important draft class for them. Brett Veach needs to hit on some of these early picks because that's where they've really struggled in the last couple of years. They have not been hitting on these first-round picks, at least consistently, and it's kind of hurt this roster. I will say this, and I apologize because I can't even remember the kid's name. That undrafted tackle out of Washington State that came in the game because of the injury to Wanya Morris, they might have found a diamond in the rough, Alex. That kid was lights out in that game and completely held his own against one of the better pass rushers in the game. Danielle Hunter could not do anything against that young rookie. So, look, I know it's a small sample size, but wow, maybe they found something with that kid. But you're right, there are bigger issues in Kansas City. And here's the other thing. Maybe missing the playoffs isn't the worst thing for this team because this is a team that's been picking 32, 31st every single year in the draft because they're either in the Super Bowl or winning the Super Bowl every year. This might be the first year where they actually get a top 15, top 20 pick. And maybe they can get one of these more elite players in the draft that can give them a spark. Like you said, a big-time plug-and-play starter at running back or one of these other positions where they can look at and say, look, we got a guy who's a day one starter or not always have to settle for, a project player late in the first round. So it might not actually be the worst thing to help this franchise kind of reset going into next year.
And really quick, Issa Pole was the tackle that came in for Wanya Morris.
Yeah, he was lights out. Man, I was so impressed by that guy. I know he had one false start and he gave up one pressure that entire game. That was it against a very, very good Houston front. And like I said, he was mostly matched up against Danielle Hunter. So, yeah, that was a lights out performance. I'm going to be actually interested to see if he gets some more playing time down the stretch and if maybe they found something with him. Let's shift to the NFC North, Alex. We had a big-time matchup. Bears-Packers. When was the last time that a Bears-Packers game felt this big? Because for the longest time, the Packers have pretty much owned the Bears, and these games haven't really meant a whole lot as far as the standings and as far as the divisional race. Well, this one, there was a lot on the line. First place in the NFC North was on the line. The Packers get a huge win. This ended up being a great game. I thought this was a great watch. Caleb Williams comes out, really was off to start this game, missed on his first 6 passes, but once he kind of settled in, he had some really incredible throws in this game. Some big moments in this game where he moved the sticks and kept the drive alive. I mean, when the Packers got up 14-3, I don't know about you, Alex, but it kind of felt like, okay, Green Bay might just pull away here. But I was really impressed with how the Bears responded.
Yeah, there's no doubt in my mind. I know a lot of people have been looking at Caleb Williams and then the new coach Ben Johnson to see how they could get along. But this was a game that you were able to see. They were able to fight. They were able to get caught up. It came down to what I think maybe a minute or 2 minutes or maybe even 3 minutes left when he threw that interception just a little bit too low for, I believe it was Colston Loveland that was in the end zone that would have been able to make a play. But this team fought back. This defense held still, stopped them from scoring, and was able to help Caleb Williams come back. I like what I saw to Caleb Williams. He's not going to throw the big interceptions. He's not going to throw too many interceptions. He's going to make plays. He's going to run the ball, and alas, be able to give you a play at the end of the game where you can say, man, if you threw a little bit higher, it would have went over the defender's head and would have been caught for a touchdown. It would have been a tie game.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. That last pick, obviously, that's a big one. It cost him the game. But Caleb and that offense, like I said, were the reason they got back into this game. That long drive they had, gosh, I want to think it was like 17-play drive, took up a ton of clock, where they marched down the field. It was methodical. It was calculated. It was perfectly balanced. They were running the ball, setting up some shots downfield, moving the sticks. They were starting to wear out that Packers defense with the run game. And you could tell in the second half that Packers defense did not have the same juice that we saw early in the game. I mean, Caleb just extended plays, had some big third downs. Like you said, just that one key mistake with the pick in the end zone. And I think the Packers actually saw that play on tape the week prior and were really ready for that play. Caleb, like you said, a little more air on that ball, and it could be a game winner. But regardless, even in a loss, I was really impressed with the Bears here, Alex. I mean, the Packers, I think, are legit Super Bowl contenders. I really do. I think they're in that group, maybe 5 teams that you could circle and say, okay, these are teams that could win the whole thing. I would put the Packers in that group. But the Bears showed that they have really come a long way this year. And they've showed me that they belong. They might not be ready to take that next step, but they're knocking on the door right now. All right, let's shift to Steelers-Ravens AFC North battle. Look, I don't know how much this game matters. I mean, I know it matters in the AFC North. I don't think either one of these teams is going to make any noise come playoff time, Alex, if I'm just being honest. But it was an entertaining game nonetheless. Steelers defense, though, once again, I'm just shaking my head. They gave up 422 yards. They only had 13 first downs on offense to the Ravens' 22 first downs, gave up 217 yards on the ground. They were only able to run the ball for 34 yards. I mean, if you looked at some of those numbers, you would think that this would have been a Ravens blowout.
Absolutely. I mean, but once you get to look at it, and then obviously everybody's going to fight over if the Isaiah Likely touchdown should have counted, if it shouldn't have counted. I mean, I don't know. It could have gone either way as far as I'm concerned for the most part. But I'm going to keep saying, and I've said it before, Lamar Jackson is hurt. I don't know exactly what's wrong, but he's definitely hurt. I don't know what the issue is. But until he gets over that, we're just going to continue to see this team go through these motions where he doesn't look like he wants to run. Sometimes he wants to run. Sometimes he doesn't want to run. But there's something wrong with Lamar here, and I think it's not going to stop until the season is over. He can get himself better.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And look, I think Aaron Rodgers on the other side played really well. I think this is maybe his best game as a Steeler. He's really the reason they probably won this game, other than, like you said, the likely overturned call was, I think it was egregious, personally. To me, it was an obvious touchdown. I don't know what they saw there. I mean, I think he took like 3 steps in the end zone with the ball in his hands. I'm not sure how that doesn't count, but regardless, I'm with you. Lamar Jackson just clearly isn't healthy. And look, I'm going to give him a lot of credit because this is a guy who tried to come back, play through some injuries. You know, he's clearly showing some toughness here because this team was 1-5. They were in the basement. And this guy said, look, I'm going to try to fight to come back and give my team a chance. And they have, as far as the AFC North, but as far as them being the contender that I think a lot of us thought they were coming into the year, myself included, clearly that has changed now because you're right. Lamar just looks human. And this is a guy who's been superhuman for the last, 3 or 4 years. He's been playing at an MVP level. He just doesn't look like that guy. And when you take away that superpower of him being able to run, it just isn't the same guy. He isn't the same guy. And like I said, I give him credit for toughing through it. But yeah, this team isn't the same team. And look, like I said, I'm not sure it really matters who wins this division because I don't think either one of them is making any noise come playoff time. But to focus on the Steelers here for a second, this Steelers team has to really look in the mirror. Regardless if they win the division and make the playoffs, that's great. We'll give you a golf clap. But the Steelers need to move every asset they have this offseason, and they need to get as many draft picks as possible. They have got to find a way to get younger. They need to find a way to get cheaper, and they need to start this rebuild. Like, they can't keep putting this off and trying to bring in veteran guys and trying to act like they're a contender when they're not. Because this year, I think, has really exposed their team building process. Wild game in the AFC, Bills, Bengals. Look, I think it's safe to say at this point, the Bengals season is probably over. You know, kind of similar to what we mentioned just a minute ago with Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, trying to get back healthy, trying to give his team a chance here late in the season. This was a big loss, though, because if they would have won, you could have seen their chances still alive. I don't know how much of a chance they have after this one. And this had to be a gut punch because, you know, they had a 10-point lead, midway through the fourth, Alex? I mean, it looked like they were about to score again and probably go up and kind of put this game out of reach. And Burrow with really a terrible pick and then throws a back-to-back picks. The pick 6, I thought was a pretty bad decision. The other pick, I'm not going to put that one on him as much. You know, batted pass, that happens. That's just kind of a tough break for a quarterback. But the pick 6, I thought, was a bad decision that really swung this game. You know, Josh Allen, we've talked about it multiple times this year. It just feels like this guy has to put the cape on once again in order for the Bills to be competitive because this defense is just terrible. Burrow carved up this team on the road in the snow. I mean, Alex, at this point, and I know we've mentioned this, but I think it's really worth mentioning again. I think anything short of a Super Bowl run, and we've got to take a serious look at Sean McDermott as possibly being done in Buffalo, because this defense continues to be a major liability for this team. That's his side of the ball. And look, Josh Allen right now is clearly good enough to win a Super Bowl, but the Bills are not.
Yeah, absolutely. Those two interceptions were the game. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, the Bengals owned this game. It was 2 interceptions, only one return for a touchdown. Then another one, they ended up getting the ball back where they could have run it in for a touchdown. So I'm not sure what it is to look at from the Bills standpoint, other than looking at, well, Joe Burrow just gave us 2 passes and we won that game, because they were not supposed to win this game. I don't care about how low their rushing yards were. They were literally not supposed to win this game at all. And it's just those 2 interceptions is the reason that the Bills won this game.
Yeah, it completely swung that game. But regardless, this team just feels way, way too dependent on Josh Allen having to put up video game numbers, and hopefully your defense makes a stop, because they were getting carved up in this game. This defense was offering really no resistance at all at home against a 4-win Bengals team. If they have an early exit in the playoffs, I think the conversations around his job security is going to get really, really loud, and I think it should be, because I think at this point you have not been able to maximize this team. Now, I've got one more game I want to get to, Alex, before we get to the college football playoff bracket. This is a game that kind of flew under the radar, obviously, because you had 2 bad teams. So we don't need to necessarily talk about the game a whole lot. Browns, Titans. But Shedeur Sanders made some strides and really had his best game as a pro so far. 364 yards, 3 touchdowns, ran for another. Yeah, he had a rookie moment, showed some room for growth. He threw a costly interception in the third quarter. But all in all, pretty impressive performance from Shedeur. So here's my question to you, Alex. Will Shedeur Sanders be the Browns' starting quarterback next season?
You know what? I don't know, but I definitely know that one of them won't be there. And it's between 3 people. Obviously, it's between the 2 quarterbacks, but the third, to me, is Stefanski. Does he still want to coach if they go ahead and they move the quarterback from Oregon? If they move him, does he still want to be the coach? I think he's put up with enough from his standpoint that he'd be willing to be let go and then go maybe sit for a year or whatever before he goes to another team. But I think this is also his opportunity to get out as well, because even though Tennessee is not good, they still lost that game 31-29. He's obviously and apparently not happy with Shedeur at the quarterback position. He'd rather have Dylan back at the quarterback position. So I think he's done enough that he can stand on his own and do what needs to be done.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point, Alex, because this is a guy who I think is respected enough around the league that he would have a job fairly quickly. I do. I think he would have a job very quickly in the NFL again if he wanted to change. And look, it could be a situation where you're right. He's just tired of ownership and management, and maybe it's time for a change here, and maybe it is. Because one thing that was very, very telling to me was they had a chance to win that game late, and in the 2-point conversion, they take Shedeur off the field and try running some wildcat trick play that totally backfired in their face. And it got me thinking here, was that deliberate? Was that a situation because Shedeur had played one heck of a game and put them in a situation where they could have won this game, and you don't want to put your rookie quarterback in to possibly have a game-winning 2-point conversion there, and instead you go with this weird trick play out of the Wildcat? That was the first time it got me thinking, maybe this guy really doesn't want Shedeur to succeed here, because we know that this coaching staff, and Stefanski included, were not thrilled with the idea of Shedeur being their quarterback, and that this decision, from all the reports we've seen, was an ownership decision on draft night. So very interesting the way that game played out. And you're right, it might be one of those things where there's a mutual parting here. So very, very interesting. I think the Browns are probably one of the more interesting bad teams in the league right now to kind of follow and see what they're going to do leading into this offseason. Because here's the other thing. Are they going to have one of the top picks? Yes. But all of a sudden, we're looking at a draft class that was supposed to be loaded with quarterbacks that doesn't look very loaded now that we're getting closer to the April draft. So we're looking at a class that might only have one bona fide first-round quarterback, and there's no guarantee that the Browns will be able to get their hands on a guy like Fernando Mendoza. So do you stick with the rookie, and then how much does ownership get involved here too, Alex? Because I think, once again, I think ownership really likes Shador and would like to see him succeed. Very, very interesting times in Cleveland. Alex, before we get to the CFP rankings and our reaction, got to give out the NFL game ball for the week. Alex, who do you got this week for your game ball?
Mine is Josh Allen, 22 of 28, 251 yards, 3 touchdowns. Also 9 carries, 78 yards, and a touchdown. That is who I have for this week.
Yeah, it's a great choice, man. I mean, like I said, defense made a couple key plays, but he was great in this game, no doubt about it. Look, my game ball this week is going to go to Rams wide receiver Puka Nacua. 7 catches, 167 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He was unstoppable in a blowout win over the Cardinals. The Rams keep rolling. So, yeah, he's going to get the game ball from me this week. Alex, let's shift gears here to college football because the college football playoff bracket is out, and I've got a lot to say about it, and I'm sure you do as well. To me, Alex, this has to be the worst selection committee we've ever had. What a mess. So, a lot of different directions we can go. There's a lot of talk about Alabama, BYU, Notre Dame, Miami. Look, a lot to get to here. So, the floor is yours. Let's start off with what do you think they missed on the most here?
I think it's when you get down to the probably 10, 11, and 12, when you didn't have kicked out when Notre Dame was out, and you had to figure out who was going to be in there at that point in time to say, all right, this is the team that we need to see. This is the team that we need to have in there. And they're not. And then obviously you have Alabama that comes in. They got beat 28-7, but they end up with the number 9 overall pick. What is going on at the bottom of that? What's going on at the bottom of that draft to find out who gets in and who doesn't get in? Obviously, you get James Madison in with their win over Troy. What are you supposed to do there?
Miami got in as an at-large, but the ACC, they really dropped the ball here as a conference because they have this stupid, complex tiebreaker system that honestly, I don't even understand how it works, because how did they allow a 7-5 Duke team to play for the ACC championship? And that's what really triggered this whole doomsday scenario for them, because then Duke goes on and wins the ACC championship. So now you have an 8-5 ACC champion that is not going to make the playoff, obviously. That leaves the door open for another group of 5 team. And look, it's already bad enough that we have a group of 5 team in there this year, because my big issue is, Alex, I have no problem with a group of 5 getting into the playoff. But it needs to be a deserving group of 5. It needs to be a team like a Boise State in years past that runs the table in the Mountain West, or a team like UCF a few years ago that ran the table, like a team like that. Cincinnati, when they got into the 14 playoff, like a team like that, I can totally understand, okay, let them get a shot. But Tulane and JMU, I mean, what are we doing here? These teams have no business being in this playoff. And what's the worst part about it is that it leaves teams out that are much more deserving. I mean, look at this matchup. Tulane is going to play Ole Miss in the first round. Tulane already lost to Ole Miss this year 45-10. What are we doing? What are we doing here? And here's the other thing. And I know your hatred for BYU, but I've got to bring them up here as well. And look, I don't have a problem with Alabama getting in. I know there's a lot of controversy around their spot, and I understand it. I understand it from this standpoint. Alabama and BYU both get blown out in their conference championship games. I think that gave the committee an opportunity where it opened the door for them to put both Notre Dame and Miami in the field. And I think that would have been the smarter move.
Yeah, it could have been the smarter move, but then you have to look at Texas beating those two top 10 teams, even though they have the 2 bad losses, and then still sitting out. I just think Texas
it was 3,
really,
right?
Or actually, it was 3. I'm sorry, it was 3.
Yeah.
It was 3. Actually, right, it was 3. Beating 3 top 10 teams and then still sitting out there. I think it's hard to have Texas out and then have Notre Dame and or Miami in without having Texas in. So I think that was the big issue there.
Yeah, and look, I think Texas had a legit case. I really do. I know they had 3 losses, but I think Texas had a legit case to be in this thing. I think the Notre Dame discussion that's getting really, really loud right now, And I understand it, but I think this is the first time where Notre Dame was actually punished for not playing in the conference and not playing a very competitive schedule. Now, they did play 2 college football playoff teams in Miami and Texas A&M early in the year, but they lost both of those games. So when you look at the rest of their schedule, it was pretty light, and their only decent win was over USC. Clearly the committee just didn't think that was enough. My big issue is why did you have Notre Dame ranked ahead of Miami all the way up until the last day of the committee, and then you flip them? That's the part that I think is really bothering people, is that if you thought Miami was better this whole time, then why was Miami ranked behind them until the last minute? Here's another thing, and I saw this on Twitter, and it's really interesting, because a lot of people are saying that Alabama shouldn't have gotten in after getting destroyed in the SEC championship game and they've got the 3 losses. Now, they had a lot of really quality wins, so I understand it. They beat Georgia in the regular season as well, but this is interesting. According to FanDuel, right now on a neutral site, Notre Dame would be a 4.5-point favorite over Alabama. So it just kind of goes to show you that, look, point spreads aren't everything, but it goes to show you that maybe Notre Dame was a lot more deserving than people think. How do we fix this, Alex? Because this whole thing turned into an absolute mess this year. And I think there's going to be a lot of changes going forward with the college football committee and how the selection process takes place. I mean, I think they've got to get rid of these automatic qualifiers. And I think we've got to really rethink these conference championship games, because once Alabama knew that they were basically in the playoff, I think I had heard that they had a 97% chance of making the playoff, even if they lost to Georgia. And then I find out later, and I didn't realize it during the game, that they had sat a bunch of starters in this game, pretty much knowing that the outcome didn't matter. So if the outcome doesn't matter, why are we playing these games? I mean, let's start there, right? Like, how are these conference championship games really helping us at this point? I think it's making the process really murky.
Well, the first thing I'll say is you're going to need Notre Dame to get into a division. So I think that's first and foremost. Notre Dame goes into the ACC. They're permanent into the ACC. That'll be the first move. Then the second move is, this is where it gets tricky, because James Madison was number 25, but they end up in the playoffs against Oregon. I think you need to do something there, just because they won their game or whatever it was. They get to jump from 25 all the way up to number 12. I think that's problem number 2. I think whatever your team is, you can get in. You get in when you win your chip, or you don't get in. And if you win your chip and you're out of the top 25 and you're out of the top 12 and you're number 25, you don't get in. I think it's just that simple.
Yeah, I think you're right. The key word is simple, because I think we are overthinking this thing. And I think we need to stop overthinking it, because once again, I mentioned the automatic qualifiers have messed this whole thing up. And now there's all this talk about expanding the CFP to try to fix this whole debacle. Look, I don't think you need to expand it. Just make it so that the G5 teams have to be an at-large selection and not an automatic qualifier. That way you leave the door open for a team, like we said, like a Boise State last year, I thought was a deserving team. They had 1 loss, and it was a close loss to a really good Oregon team. So when you look at a team like that, that resume is enough for me to say, okay, you know what? They can get in. But Tulane and James Madison have no business being in this thing. And it's a joke. It really is. This would be the equivalent, Alex, if the NBA playoffs were set and all of a sudden the NBA said, okay, we're going to let the 2 best G League teams play in this too. What are we doing? I mean, you know what I mean? It's like, look, and I know it sounds like I'm taking a shot at these teams. I'm really not, because I think James Madison is a really good program. Tulane's a really good program at the level that they play at. Those are good teams. I think they're good coaches, and they just landed some good jobs because of how well they did at that level. So I'm not trying to crap on the little guy here, but we have to look at this realistically and say, look, are these the 12 best teams? Are these the 12 most deserving teams? And I don't think they are. Let's just simplify this whole thing, get rid of the automatic qualifiers, and let's just pick the top 12 teams, regardless of conference, regardless of anything. Let's just look at it and say, look, who are the 12 best teams? Let's not overthink it, because right now and I've got one other point here, Alex, and we talked about this the other week, and I am surprised at how little attention this is getting in the media. Why did Ole Miss get in?
I don't know. Outside of the coach leaving, obviously we saw this happen last time with Florida State when Jordan Travis got hurt. But they still have all their players. They still have all their coaches. Everybody's still willing to play. So I guess they deserve to get in.
Well, but they don't have their head coach or their offensive play caller, right? And so to me, look, the resume tells me that they belong in the field, right? The resume does. But if you're going to punish an undefeated Florida State team for not having their quarterback, but you're not going to punish a team that doesn't have their head coach or their offensive play caller going into the playoffs, I have a real issue with that. I really do. And I wouldn't have had Ole Miss in the playoff. I wouldn't have. I just don't think they had the onions to actually do it. And it's got to be really, if you're a Florida State fan, I mean, you had to have thrown up seeing that thinking, wait, what is the difference here? The coach isn't just as important as a quarterback. I think it's more important, especially when he's your OC. So I didn't like that at all. I would have left them out. And I'm going to tell you, Alex, and I want to get your thoughts. Here's my top 12 teams. These are the 12 teams that I think should have made the playoff this year. Indiana, Ohio State, Georgia, Oregon, Texas A&M, Oklahoma, Alabama, which I know there's some controversy there, but I think their resume is good enough. Miami, Notre Dame, Texas, and I think BYU sneaks in, even though I think, they are a little bit fraudulent, but their record, they only had one regular season loss. I know they got crushed by Texas Tech, but they would probably have been the 12th team. You could easily make a case for Vanderbilt. That's fine. I would have been okay with that too. But Ole Miss, I will say, on paper and as far as what we saw in the regular season, they are better than BYU, but coaching matters. So I'm leaving Ole Miss out. They would have been in there if Kiffin's still there. But I want your thoughts on the top 12, because to me, that's a much better bracket. Because I don't know about you. Are you fired up for Tulane, Ole Miss, or Oregon and James Madison?
Well, absolutely not. And I think the only thing left out of what you said that I would have switched would have been, I would have put in Vanderbilt for BYU. That would have been the team because Vanderbilt faced 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 teams. They faced six ranked teams that did this year, and they won all of them with the exception of 2, which was Alabama and Texas were the only 2 teams that they lost to. Other than that, I would have definitely put Vanderbilt in there over BYU. So I didn't have a problem with what you said.
Yeah, and on a side note here, I think it's rest in peace to the bowl system as we know it. I mean, I think this thing was already kind of hanging on with life support here, and I think they're about to pull the plug on this thing, because have you seen how many teams, Alex, have opted out of bowl games, including Notre Dame? I mean, Notre Dame said, we can't play in the playoff. They just took their ball and went home. But a lot of teams followed suit here. Teams do not want to play in these, basically pretty meaningless bowl games. What are your thoughts on all these teams opting out?
The teams opting out. I mean, I thought that Notre Dame thought that they should have been in. Obviously believe that they thought they would have been in, so they would have been able to sit comfortable at number 11, between 10 and 12, and play whoever they played, and then opt out because they didn't make it and not want to play in that game. I'm not too upset about it, but I get it. But I'm not too upset about it with teams like Notre Dame saying we're not going to play.
Yeah, I think it's just a sign of the times. And unfortunately, I don't think it's going to change anytime soon. Alex, before we get out of here, got to give out the final helmet sticker before we go into the playoffs. This week's helmet sticker for me is going to go to the Bronco Nagurski Award winner, Jacob Rodriguez. I think this is now 2 helmet stickers I've given this guy this year so far. Texas Tech linebacker. This guy's unbelievable. He absolutely deserved to win that award. I actually nominated him as well for this award. I'm glad to see him win it. 13 tackles and a tackle for a loss in a dominant Big 12 game where they absolutely destroyed BYU. His defense only gives up 7 points. He was a big part of that. A really impressive player. This guy was a former walk-on, Alex, and is now one of the best players in the country. So great story and another big-time game for him on a big stage.
Yeah, and I'm going to go with Wayne Knight out of James Madison, 21 carries, 212 yards and a touchdown, and then another 2 catches for 11 yards in the passing game, but mainly what he did on the ground because, alas, Alonzo Barnett only threw for 93 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. So he really controlled the running game for James Madison over Troy.
Yeah, I like that. Giving some love to the G5 after we just crapped all over him. I like that, Alex. That's nice of you to do that. Yeah. No, it's definitely deserving for sure. That is going to do it for today's episode, guys. Hope you enjoyed it, PGF Nation. Be sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Follow on social media at PGF Podcast. And like I said, make sure you subscribe on whatever platform you listen to so you don't miss out on any future episodes. But once again, I'm Brad Fowler. He's Alex Higdon. This is Pint Glass Football, and we'll catch you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Pint Glass Football Podcast. Be sure to subscribe and follow us on Twitter at PGF Podcast.